Greg's world had been turned upside down. With Mary moving on and finding happiness with Michael, and his own emotional state in disarray, he felt a deep sense of loss and confusion. Amidst this turmoil, Nellie, a longtime acquaintance and admirer of Greg, saw an opportunity. For years, Nellie had harbored feelings for Greg, but his heart had always been set on Mary. Now, with Mary out of reach, Nellie saw a chance to finally be with him. Nellie had always been supportive and kind, often acting as a confidant to Greg in his darkest times. Her feelings for him were genuine, and she believed that with Mary out of the picture, Greg might see her in a new light. However, she was aware of Greg's reputation, his narcissistic tendencies and the emotional damage he had caused. As Greg navigated his personal upheaval, he found himself increasingly drawn to Nellie's unwavering support. She was there for him in ways he hadn't anticipated, offering a shoulder to lean on and a listening ear. Greg, while initially resistant, began to entertain the idea of giving Nellie a chance, feeling both curiosity and a hint of guilt. One evening, after a particularly trying day, Greg and Nellie sat together in his apartment. The weight of his emotions was heavy, and he found solace in Nellie's presence. He glanced at her, noting the kindness in her eyes, a stark contrast to the turbulent emotions he was grappling with. "Nellie, you've always been there for me," Greg began, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "I don't know how to thank you for that." Nellie smiled gently, sensing the gravity of the moment. "You don't need to thank me, Greg. I care about you deeply, and I want to support you in any way I can." Greg hesitated, struggling with the conflict inside him. His heart was still scarred by the end of his relationship with Mary, and the thought of starting anew felt daunting. He was aware of his flaws and the impact they had on those around him. While he recognized that he should strive to be a better person, the idea of truly changing felt overwhelming, especially now that Mary was no longer a part of his life. Despite his internal struggle, Greg decided to give Nellie a chance, but his intentions were far from genuine. He was not ready to open his heart or to love again. Instead, he saw Nellie as a temporary solace, a way to fill the void left by Mary's departure. He knew that his own inability to commit fully could lead to further disappointment, but he was not prepared to confront his own issues head-on. Nellie, on the other hand, was hopeful. She believed that with time, she could help Greg heal and see her for the person she was, rather than just a consolation prize. She approached their relationship with optimism, hoping that Greg's feelings might evolve and that he might eventually recognize her value beyond the shadows of his past. As their relationship began to take shape, it became evident that Greg was struggling with his own emotional barriers. He engaged with Nellie on a surface level, maintaining a polite distance but keeping her at arm's length emotionally. While he appreciated her presence, he was unable to fully invest in the relationship. Nellie sensed Greg's reluctance and felt the weight of his unresolved issues. She grappled with the challenge of loving someone who was not ready to reciprocate those feelings fully. Despite her best efforts, the emotional connection between them remained strained, and she found herself questioning whether she could truly be happy in this unbalanced dynamic. As the weeks turned into months, Greg's emotional state began to shift. He continued to experience moments of introspection, particularly when he saw how Nellie's patience and unwavering support contrasted sharply with his own unresolved issues. It was during these moments that he realized the depth of his shortcomings and the impact they were having on his relationships. Eventually, Greg came to a realization that despite his fears and reluctance, he needed to confront his own flaws and work on becoming a better person, not for Nellie, but for himself. He recognized that meaningful change required more than just superficial gestures. It required a genuine commitment to self-improvement and emotional honesty. In a candid conversation with Nellie, Greg admitted his struggle. "I appreciate everything you've done for me, Nellie. But I realize now that I'm not ready to give you what you deserve. I need to work on myself before I can be a true partner." Nellie listened with a heavy heart. While she was disappointed, she understood the importance of Greg's self-awareness. Nellie's heart was set on Greg, and she was determined not to let her long-held feelings go unfulfilled. She had waited for years, supporting him from the sidelines, and now, with Mary out of the picture, she was resolute in making her dream of a life with Greg a reality. Despite Greg's hesitance and clear emotional distance, Nellie was undeterred. She believed that her love and patience would eventually win him over. When Greg showed signs of uncertainty, Nellie decided to take a bold step. She forcefully moved into his mansion, convinced that living together would bring them closer and eventually lead Greg to recognize her love. Initially, Greg was taken aback by Nellie's sudden and assertive move. The change in his domestic environment unsettled him, and the pressure of cohabiting with someone he wasn't ready to fully commit to created a volatile atmosphere. What started as a hopeful gesture quickly soured, revealing cracks in their relationship. Greg, already struggling with his own unresolved issues and emotional turmoil, found Nellie's forceful intrusion overwhelming. His discomfort turned to frustration, and the strain began to manifest in troubling ways. What had initially been subtle signs of emotional detachment escalated into verbal and emotional abuse. Nellie's hope quickly turned into disillusionment as she found herself on the receiving end of Greg's anger and manipulation. He became increasingly controlling, lashing out over minor grievances and creating an oppressive environment. The once supportive and kind demeanor she had admired now seemed a facade, hiding a darker side of Greg's personality. One evening, after a particularly harsh argument, Nellie sat alone in the opulent but cold mansion, feeling the weight of her decision. Greg's harsh words echoed in her mind, and she grappled with the reality of the situation. She had hoped to build a life of love and partnership, but instead, she was trapped in an abusive relationship. Nellie reached out to friends and family, seeking support and guidance. Her initial attempts to make the relationship work had failed, and now she faced the painful reality that she needed to prioritize her own safety and well-being. The love she had hoped to nurture had turned toxic, and she had to confront the difficult decision of whether to stay or leave. With the encouragement of her loved ones, Nellie decided to take a stand for herself. She sought legal advice and began making plans to leave Greg's mansion. It was a challenging and emotionally taxing process, but she was determined to reclaim her independence and rebuild her life. As Nellie prepared to leave, Greg's behavior became even more erratic and aggressive. The once elegant mansion now felt like a prison, and Nellie knew that leaving was not just a matter of choice but a necessity for her safety. The emotional and physical toll of the relationship had been profound, and she was resolved to escape the situation. On the day of her departure, Nellie packed her belongings with a heavy heart but a firm resolve. She left behind the mansion and the shattered dreams of a life with Greg, choosing instead to focus on her own healing and recovery. The journey was arduous, but with the support of friends and family, she began to rebuild her life from the ground up. Greg, now facing the consequences of his abusive behavior, was left to confront the fallout of his actions. His relationships, both personal and professional, were strained by his conduct. He was forced to reflect on the damage he had caused and the need for significant change in his own life. As Nellie settled into her new life, away from the tumultuous relationship with Greg, she began reflecting on her experiences and the lessons learned. The once hopeful dreams she had of building a life with Greg had crumbled under the weight of his abusive nature. The emotional scars left by the relationship were deep, but Nellie was determined to find strength and healing. It was during this period of reflection and recovery that Nellie made a startling discovery. Through conversations with former acquaintances and mutual connections, she began piecing together the truth about Greg's behavior and the reasons behind Mary's departure from their relationship. Nellie learned that Mary had faced similar issues during her marriage with Greg. While Greg had presented a polished and charming facade to the outside world, he had a darker side that was revealed behind closed doors. Mary had endured Greg's narcissistic tendencies and emotional abuse, which ultimately led to the end of their relationship. This realization was both shocking and painful for Nellie, as it explained the disparity between Greg's public persona and his private behavior. The more Nellie uncovered, the more she understood why Mary had left Greg and why their relationship had never lasted. It became evident that Greg's abusive tendencies were not just isolated incidents but a pattern of behavior that had persisted throughout his relationships. Mary's departure had been a courageous step towards self-preservation, something Nellie wished she had recognized sooner. Nellie also discovered that Greg had kept their relationship largely hidden from the public eye. While Mary's departure had been a topic of speculation and discussion, Greg had kept his involvement with Nellie private, revealing it only to close associates. This secrecy was not merely a matter of discretion but a reflection of his unwillingness to fully commit or acknowledge the seriousness of his relationships. Nellie's occasional mentions of her involvement with Greg had been met with a mix of curiosity and skepticism from her social circle. Many had assumed that Greg was simply not ready for a serious commitment, but few knew the true extent of his abusive nature. Nellie realized that her own naivety had allowed her to overlook the warning signs and to believe in the possibility of changing Greg. With this new understanding, Nellie felt a profound sense of betrayal and sorrow. The man she had hoped to build a future with was not the gentleman he had appeared to be, but a deeply flawed individual whose behavior had caused significant harm. The realization brought a mix of anger and sadness as she grappled with the impact of Greg's actions on her life and the lives of others. As Nellie processed these revelations, she found solace in her newfound clarity. The knowledge that she was not alone in her suffering, and that others had faced similar struggles, provided a sense of validation. It also reinforced her commitment to healing and moving forward. Nellie began to share her experiences with trusted friends and support groups, using her story as a cautionary tale about the dangers of narcissistic and abusive relationships. Her openness became a source of strength for others who had faced similar challenges, and she found purpose in helping others recognize the signs of abuse and seek help. Greg, on the other hand, continued to face the consequences of his behavior. His reputation among his associates and in the broader community began to suffer as the truth about his abusive nature became more widely known. The facade he had maintained was crumbling, and he was left to confront the reality of his actions and the impact they had on those around him. For Nellie, the journey of recovery was ongoing. She focused on rebuilding her life, rediscovering her passions, and forming healthy, supportive relationships. The lessons learned from her time with Greg became a foundation for personal growth, and she approached her future with a renewed sense of self-worth and resilience. After escaping the toxic relationship with Greg, Nellie was left grappling with the aftermath of her experiences. The pain and betrayal she had endured were profound, and she felt a deep-seated need to share her story. With a growing sense of purpose, Nellie decided to speak out publicly about the abuse she had faced. Nellie's decision was not made lightly. She knew that revealing the truth would not only expose Greg's abusive behavior but also risk public backlash and scrutiny. However, she was determined to shed light on the reality behind the facade Greg had maintained. By sharing her experiences, she hoped to offer a warning to others and to find a sense of closure and justice. She began appearing on various media platforms, participating in interviews and public forums. Nellie's recounting of her experiences was raw and powerful, resonating with many who had faced similar struggles. Her courage in speaking out drew significant media attention, and soon her story became a widely discussed topic. The revelations had a dramatic impact on Greg's life and career. As Nellie detailed the abusive dynamics of their relationship, the public and the business community were shocked. Greg, who had always been seen as a successful and respected businessman, was now facing intense scrutiny. The contrast between his polished public image and the disturbing details of his private behavior was jarring. The fallout was swift and severe. Major shareholders in Greg's company, alarmed by the news and concerned about the implications for their investments, began withdrawing their support. The stock value of Greg's company plummeted as investors fled, and the financial stability of the company became increasingly precarious. Greg's once thriving business empire was on the brink of collapse. The public relations crisis was compounded by a series of legal and financial challenges. The media coverage and the exodus of investors left Greg in a precarious position, facing the very real threat of bankruptcy. As his financial troubles mounted, Greg was forced to confront the full extent of his actions and their consequences. The damage to his reputation was immense, and he found himself isolated from both his professional and personal networks. The luxurious life he had once enjoyed was slipping away, replaced by the harsh reality of his circumstances. Nellie, though initially overwhelmed by the enormity of her actions, found a sense of vindication in seeing the truth come to light. Her decision to speak out had not only exposed the reality of her experiences but had also triggered a broader conversation about abuse and accountability. She received support from advocacy groups and individuals who praised her bravery and resilience. Despite the attention and the temporary sense of justice, Nellie remained focused on her own healing and recovery. She continued to work on rebuilding her life and supporting others who had faced similar challenges. Her story became a beacon of hope for those in abusive situations, showing that speaking out could lead to change and accountability. As Greg's world continued to unravel, he was forced to reckon with the damage he had caused. The path to redemption, if it existed, would require significant personal transformation and a genuine commitment to change. His actions had irrevocably altered the course of his life, and the journey ahead was fraught with challenges. In the end, Nellie's decision to share her story was a turning point, both for herself and for Greg. It highlighted the power of speaking out and the impact of confronting the truth. While Greg faced the consequences of his behavior, Nellie emerged as a symbol of strength and resilience, using her experience to advocate for change and to inspire others. As Mary observed the fallout from Nellie's revelations, she felt a conflicted mix of emotions. She had seen Greg's true nature and had suffered from his abusive behavior, yet the sight of him now facing such severe hardship stirred a sense of pity within her. Greg, despite his flaws and the pain he had caused, was still the father of her child, and that connection bound her to him in a way she couldn't easily ignore. Mary's life had flourished since their separation. Netfarm Pharmaceuticals had become a prominent name in the industry, and her expansion plans were progressing smoothly. Her success had provided her with the means and the freedom to support causes she believed in, and she saw an opportunity to extend an olive branch to Greg, not out of obligation, but from a place of compassion. Determined to help without being recognized, Mary carefully devised a plan. She wanted to provide Greg with the assistance he needed without complicating her own life or revealing her identity. Her goal was to offer a lifeline that could stabilize Greg's situation, giving him a chance to address his personal issues and rebuild his life without the public knowing her involvement. Mary's approach was strategic. She enlisted the help of a trusted advisor, someone who was discreet and capable of managing sensitive operations. Through this advisor, Mary arranged for a substantial but anonymous financial aid package to be provided to Greg's company. The funds were structured as a series of investments and loans, ensuring that Greg's immediate financial crisis could be mitigated without revealing the source of the assistance. The anonymous aid came with no strings attached. Greg, struggling to manage the financial collapse and his crumbling reputation, was initially bewildered by the sudden influx of support. He could not trace the source of the funds and was left to wonder who had provided this unexpected lifeline. The assistance was enough to stabilize the company temporarily, allowing him some breathing room to address the ongoing crisis. While Greg tried to piece together the puzzle of his mysterious benefactor, Mary continued to stay out of the spotlight. She focused on her own achievements and the growth of Netfarm, using her success to drive positive change in other areas. Despite the turmoil of Greg's situation, she found solace in the knowledge that she had done what she could to help him in his time of need. Mary's actions also served as a testament to her character. Despite the pain Greg had caused her, she chose to act with empathy and generosity. Her decision was a reflection of her own growth and her commitment to being a force for good, even in challenging circumstances. As Greg's situation improved, he began to reassess his life and the choices that had led him to this point. The financial assistance allowed him to stabilize his company and regain some control over his professional and personal affairs. While the damage to his reputation was still significant, the unexpected support gave him a chance to work on his redemption. Over time, Greg became aware of the broader implications of his behavior and the need for genuine personal change. He sought professional help and began to confront his past actions more honestly. Though the road to redemption was long and arduous, the anonymous assistance had provided him with a crucial opportunity to begin the process. Mary, meanwhile, continued to thrive in her own life, focusing on her family and her work. Her compassion for Greg remained a private matter, known only to a select few. Her involvement was a quiet, unspoken act of kindness, and she took comfort in knowing that she had made a difference without seeking recognition. In the end, Mary's decision to help Greg in his time of need was a powerful reminder of the complexities of human relationships and the capacity for empathy and forgiveness. Her actions highlighted the possibility of moving beyond past grievances and finding a way to support others, even in difficult circumstances. For Greg, the anonymous aid marked the beginning of a journey toward self-reflection and change. While the impact of his past actions could not be undone, the chance to rebuild and grow was a valuable opportunity. Mary's compassion, though hidden from view, left an indelible mark on both their lives. Mary's decision to help Greg anonymously had a ripple effect that extended beyond the business world and into her personal life. While she found solace in knowing she had done something positive, the move created unexpected tensions in her relationship with Michael, her current partner. Michael had always admired Mary for her strength and integrity, but he struggled with the notion that she was providing support to her ex-husband. To him, it felt like a lingering connection to Greg, a ghost from her past that threatened their future together. The financial aid, although done discreetly, seemed to Michael like an unresolved tie that he couldn't fully understand. As Mary and Michael's relationship continued to evolve, the strain became more apparent. Michael's feelings of insecurity grew as he grappled with the idea that Mary was still emotionally tied to Greg in some way. He saw her actions as an indication that she hadn't fully let go of her past relationship, which created a growing rift between them. One evening, the tension came to a head. Mary and Michael were having dinner at their favorite restaurant, but the atmosphere was charged with unspoken conflict. Michael's demeanor was distant, and Mary could sense his unease. "Mary, we need to talk," Michael said abruptly, breaking the silence. "I've been feeling unsettled about something, and I think it's time we addressed it." Mary looked at him with concern, sensing the gravity of the moment. "What's on your mind, Michael?" Michael took a deep breath, trying to articulate his feelings. "I've been thinking about your decision to help Greg. I understand you wanted to do something compassionate, but I can't help feeling like there's still a part of you that's connected to him. It's affecting how I see our future." Mary's heart sank. She had hoped to shield Michael from the complexities of her past, but now his concerns were out in the open. "Michael, I did what I thought was right. Greg and I have a history, and while it's complicated, I wanted to help him because he's the father of my child. It doesn't mean I have unresolved feelings for him." Michael's frustration was evident. "It's not just about feelings. It's about trust and moving forward. I need to know that you're fully committed to our relationship and that the past isn't interfering with our future." Mary took a moment to collect her thoughts. She understood Michael's perspective, but she also felt that his reaction was rooted in insecurity and misunderstanding. "Michael, I'm committed to us and to building a life together. Helping Greg was a decision based on compassion and responsibility, not a reflection of my feelings for him. I need you to trust that." The conversation continued, with both Mary and Michael expressing their concerns and fears. Mary explained her motivations behind helping Greg and reassured Michael of her dedication to their relationship. Michael, in turn, shared his feelings of inadequacy and the fear of being compared to her past. Despite the emotional intensity of the conversation, it marked a crucial moment of honesty and vulnerability in their relationship. Mary and Michael had to navigate their way through these issues to strengthen their bond and address underlying insecurities. In the days that followed, Michael made an effort to understand Mary's perspective better. He began to recognize that her actions were driven by a sense of moral responsibility rather than lingering emotional attachment. At the same time, Mary worked to address Michael's concerns, reassuring him of her commitment and actively working to build trust between them. The process of healing and understanding was gradual. Michael sought ways to manage his insecurities and focus on their relationship's strengths. Mary continued to be transparent about her past and her motivations, striving to balance her compassion for Greg with her commitment to Michael. Through open communication and mutual effort, Mary and Michael began to mend the rift caused by the situation. They found ways to support each other and build a stronger foundation for their future. The experience served as a test of their relationship, challenging them to confront their fears and insecurities but ultimately leading to greater understanding and intimacy. Michael stood at the grand window of his family estate, gazing out at the sprawling gardens. The flowers were in full bloom, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the dark thoughts that clouded his mind. His parents had always expected him to follow the path laid out for him, to marry the girl they had chosen, secure the family legacy, and continue the traditions that had been passed down for generations, but Michael's heart had led him elsewhere. He had met Mary at a charity event, where her gentle smile and the way she cared for her daughter, Terry, had captivated him. Mary was everything the arranged match was not: warm, compassionate, and real. The fact that she was divorced and a mother did not deter him. If anything, it made him admire her strength even more. His family, however, was less understanding. They couldn't comprehend why Michael would choose a woman like Mary, especially when there was a perfectly suitable match waiting for him. They began to raise objections, finding fault with Mary's past, questioning her character, and even suggesting that she was only interested in Michael for his wealth. But Michael was resolute. He had seen the pain Mary had endured from her abusive ex-husband, Greg, and he admired her resilience. He had grown close to Terry, the little girl who had become the light of his life. He wasn't just fighting for his love for Mary, he was fighting for the family he had begun to see himself as part of. "Michael, you have to understand," his father had said during one of their many heated discussions, "marrying that woman will bring nothing but scandal to this family. You have a duty, a responsibility to uphold. My responsibility, Michael replied firmly, is to the people I love. Mary and Terry need me, and I need them. I won't abandon them just because it's inconvenient for you. His mother had tried a different approach, appealing to his sense of loyalty. We only want what's best for you, Michael. Can't you see that we're trying to protect you? But Michael shook his head. I don't need protection from Mary. She's not the threat you think she is. The real danger would be living a life without her. And so, the battle lines were drawn. Michael's family continued to pressure him, even going so far as to arrange meetings with the woman they had chosen. But Michael refused every attempt, his love for Mary growing stronger with each passing day. He knew that his choice would come with consequences, but he was ready to face them. For Michael, love wasn't about finding the perfect match according to society's standards. It was about finding someone who made him feel whole, someone who accepted him as he was and whom he could support in return. And in Mary, he had found exactly that. The tension in the mansion was palpable. The once warm and inviting halls of the estate had become cold and unwelcoming, reflecting the growing rift between Michael and his family. His decision to stand by Mary had not only shocked his parents but had also provoked their ire. His father, a stern man with a deep sense of tradition, had taken the lead in the campaign to separate Michael from Mary. Over a tense dinner, he delivered his ultimatum. You're leaving us no choice, Michael, his father said, his voice laced with frustration. If you continue down this path, if you insist on being with that woman, you will be cut off from the family inheritance. You will have nothing. Michael stared at his father, the weight of his words sinking in. He had always known that his family valued their legacy above all else, but to hear them threaten him with complete disinheritance was still a shock. The room fell silent, his mother watching him with a mixture of sorrow and disappointment, while his father's stern gaze remained fixed on him. But Michael had already made up his mind. He knew what was at stake, but the thought of leaving Mary and Terry was unbearable. They had become his world, and he couldn't imagine a life without them. Is that really what you think of me? Michael finally asked, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. That I'm only here because of the money. His father's expression softened slightly, but the resolve in his eyes didn't waver. It's not just about the money, Michael. It's about the future of this family. You're throwing everything away for love, Michael interrupted. I'm throwing everything away for love. And I'm willing to do it because Mary and Terry are worth more to me than any inheritance. His mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Michael, please? You've always been the sensible one. Think about what you're giving up. I have, Michael replied, his voice firm. And I've decided that I'm willing to sacrifice it all for the life I want. A life with them. The ultimatum loomed over him, but Michael felt an unexpected sense of clarity. He had always known that his family's wealth and influence came with strings attached, but now those strings were threatening to bind him to a life he didn't want. I won't be controlled by threats, Michael said, standing up from the table. If you want to cut me off, then so be it. But understand this, I won't abandon the people I love just because it's inconvenient for you. As he walked out of the dining room, Michael felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The road ahead would be difficult, but he knew he was making the right choice. He was choosing love, even if it meant losing everything else. Michael knew his family well enough to realize that the ultimatum was only the beginning. The threat of disinheritance was powerful, but it wasn't the full extent of what they were capable of. He steeled himself for what might come next, determined to remain true to his love for Mary. His suspicions were confirmed when his parents introduced Becky back into the picture. Becky, the woman his family had chosen for him, had long resigned herself to the fact that Michael's heart lay elsewhere. She had accepted that their paths would never align, and for a while, she had even withdrawn from the social circles that intertwined their lives. But when Michael's family approached her with renewed interest, Becky saw an opportunity. With their backing, she felt emboldened, convinced that she could win Michael over if she tried hard enough. After all, she had grown up alongside him, knew his family's expectations, and was everything they wanted in a wife for their son. And now, she had their full support in her endeavor. Becky began to appear more frequently, always seemingly by chance, at events Michael attended. She dressed impeccably, her demeanor polished and charming as she subtly inserted herself into his life. At first, Michael tried to brush off her advances, politely but firmly making it clear that he wasn't interested. But Becky was persistent. She would linger after events, catching him in moments when he was alone, and her attempts at seduction grew bolder. "Michael, we've known each other for so long," Becky would say, her voice soft and persuasive. "We could have something really special, you know that. Your family wants us to be together. They believe in us." But Michael's resolve didn't waver. "Becky, you're a good person, and I respect you. But I'm in love with Mary. My decision is made." Despite his clear rejection, Becky continued her efforts, encouraged by the quiet nods and whispered encouragements from his parents. They had convinced her that if she could just get close enough, Michael might reconsider. The more she pressed, the more Michael felt suffocated by the relentless pressure. His love for Mary remained his anchor, but the constant seduction attempts and his family's manipulation were wearing him down. He began to avoid gatherings where Becky might be, spending more time with Mary and Terry, who had become his refuge from the turmoil. One evening, after another unwanted encounter with Becky, Michael returned to Mary's small, cozy home. Terry was playing with her dolls in the living room, and Mary was in the kitchen preparing dinner. The warmth and simplicity of the scene struck Michael, reminding him of what truly mattered. Mary looked up as he entered, sensing the strain in his expression. "Rough day?" she asked gently. Michael nodded, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. "They're not going to stop, Mary. My family, Becky, they're all trying to tear us apart." Mary walked over to him, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "But you're here now, with us. That's what matters." Michael looked into her eyes, finding the strength he needed. "I'm not going anywhere. No matter what they do, no matter how hard they push, I'm staying with you and Terry. We'll face whatever comes together." The night was alive with music and laughter as the gala event reached its peak. Michael attended out of obligation, knowing full well that his presence would be expected. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, but his thoughts were far from the sparkling chandeliers and elegant attire. All he could think about was getting back to Mary and Terry, to the warmth and comfort of their home. Unbeknownst to Michael, Becky had orchestrated a plan that night, a final, desperate attempt to secure the life she and Michael's family wanted for her. She had made arrangements with one of the wait staff, a woman who had been promised a sum so large that she couldn't refuse. The plan was simple but sinister. Michael would be drugged, and in his disoriented state, Becky would lead him to a hotel room, where she would make her move. As Michael stood at the bar, waiting for a glass of water, the waiter approached him with a charming smile, offering him a drink that had been subtly tampered with. Trusting the familiar face, Michael accepted the glass, unaware of the danger that lurked within. Minutes later, the room began to blur, and a strange heaviness settled over him. His thoughts grew muddled, and his movements felt sluggish. Confused, he tried to steady himself, but the world around him tilted. Becky, who had been watching from a distance, saw her moment. Feigning concern, she hurried to his side. "Michael, you don't look well. Let me help you." Too disoriented to protest, Michael allowed Becky to guide him out of the event. She led him to a waiting car, which drove them to a nearby hotel. The night air did little to clear his head, and by the time they reached the room, Michael could barely stand. Inside the dimly lit room, Becky laid Michael on the bed, her heart pounding with anticipation. She knew this was her last chance. If she could get pregnant with his child, she believed that not only would Michael be forced to marry her, but his family would have no choice but to accept her as their daughter-in-law. She would secure her place, no matter the cost. As Michael drifted in and out of consciousness, Becky took advantage of the situation. Her actions were calculated, driven by desperation and a desire to finally claim what she believed was rightfully hers. The following morning, Michael woke with a splitting headache, the events of the previous night a confusing blur. He found himself in an unfamiliar hotel room, with a sense of dread creeping over him as the memories slowly pieced themselves together. Becky was gone, but the implications of what had happened were starting to dawn on him. He felt sick, not just from the after effects of the drug, but from the realization that Becky had crossed a line he never imagined. The betrayal was overwhelming. He knew he had to get out of there, to clear his head and figure out what to do next. As he dressed and left the hotel, Michael's mind raced with questions and fears. What had Becky done? And more importantly, what would this mean for his relationship with Mary? How could he explain this to her, and how could they move forward after this? Michael hurried home, his mind still foggy from the events of the previous night, but his thoughts were focused on getting back to Mary and Terry. As he walked up the familiar path to their home, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was wrong when he entered the house. The usual warmth that greeted him was absent. Instead, the air felt heavy, tense. Terry was quietly playing in the living room, but there was no sign of Mary. His heart began to race as he called out her name. Mary? I'm home. She appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. The sight of her like this sent a jolt of fear through Michael's chest. He had never seen her look so devastated. Mary, what's wrong? What happened? He asked, crossing the room to her, but she stepped back, avoiding his touch. Don't, she whispered, her voice trembling. Don't come near me right now. Michael froze, confused and hurt by her reaction. Mary, please, talk to me. What's going on? Mary's hand shook as she pulled out her phone and thrust it toward him. Explain this, she demanded, her voice cracking. Michael's heart dropped as he took the phone from her and saw the photos on the screen. They were of him and Becky, taken in that hotel room, intimate and damning. His stomach twisted in horror as he realized what Becky had done. No, Mary, it's not what it looks like, Michael stammered, his mind racing to find the right words. I was drugged. Becky set this up. I don't even remember most of what happened. But Mary's expression was a mix of anger and pain. How am I supposed to believe that, Michael? I trusted you. I thought you were different, that you really loved me. I do love you. Michael pleaded, reaching out to her. Mary, I swear, this wasn't me. Becky, she's trying to ruin us, to drive us apart. Please, you have to believe me. Mary shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I want to believe you, Michael, but these pictures, they're right here in front of me. How can I just ignore them? Michael felt desperation clawing at him. He couldn't lose Mary, not like this, not because of Becky's cruel manipulation. He knew that if he couldn't convince her of the truth, Becky would have succeeded in tearing them apart. Mary, I know this looks terrible, and I'm so sorry you had to see those pictures, but I promise you, I would never betray you like that. You and Terry are everything to me. Becky did this on purpose. She wants to break us up, to force me into marrying her, but I won't let her. You're the one I love, Mary. Please, you have to trust me. Mary looked at him, her expression torn between the evidence before her and the love she knew they shared. Her heart ached with the possibility that Michael might be telling the truth, but the pain of seeing those pictures was too raw, too real. I need time, Michael, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to think. Please, just go. Michael's heart shattered at her words, but he nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. I'll give you all the time you need, he said softly. But please, just know that I love you. I would never do anything to hurt you. With that, he left the house, the weight of the situation pressing down on him like never before. Becky's trap had worked, and now he was faced with the very real possibility that he might lose the woman he loved. But Michael wasn't ready to give up, not on Mary, not on their love, and not on the family they had started to build together. Determined to clear his name and make things right with Mary, Michael knew he had to find out what really happened that fateful night. The images Becky had sent to Mary haunted him, but he was sure of one thing: whatever had occurred, it wasn't of his own volition. He needed proof, not just to show Mary, but to understand for himself how things had gone so horribly wrong. Michael made his way back to the hotel, his mind set on getting answers. The sleek, modern building stood in stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside him. As he approached the front desk, he could feel his heart pounding in his chest, a mix of anxiety and determination driving him forward. I need to speak with someone from management, Michael demanded, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. Something happened here last night, and I need to see the security footage. The receptionist glanced at him nervously, clearly uncomfortable with the request. I'm sorry, sir, but we can't just release that information. It's against our policy. Michael wasn't about to be brushed off. Listen, this is serious. I was drugged here last night, and something happened to me that I can't remember. If you don't cooperate, I'll have no choice but to involve the authorities and sue this hotel for negligence. His words hung in the air, a threat that he hoped would be enough to break through the hotel's reluctance. The receptionist hesitated, then picked up the phone and called the manager. Within minutes, the manager, a composed man in his mid-50s, approached Michael with a concerned expression. Sir, I understand you have a serious issue, but we have procedures to follow. What exactly are you alleging? Michael took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. I attended an event last night and ended up here in a room with a woman I didn't consent to be with. I was drugged, and now my life is falling apart because of it. All I'm asking for is to see the footage from the lobby and the hallway leading to my room. If you don't want this to turn into a legal battle, you'll help me. The manager's face tightened, clearly realizing the gravity of the situation. After a moment of tense silence, he nodded. Let's go to my office. Once inside the manager's office, Michael watched as the footage was brought up on a monitor. His heart raced as he saw himself, visibly unsteady, being led through the hotel by Becky. He watched as she guided him to the room, but something else caught his eye, another figure in the background, the waiter from the event, handing Becky a small item just before they entered the elevator. Who's that? Michael asked, pointing at the screen. The manager leaned closer, frowning. That's one of our staff, but she resigned this morning. Said she had another job offer. Michael's instincts kicked in. I need her name and contact information. I believe she was involved in what happened to me. The manager hesitated again but knew they were already in too deep. Reluctantly, he handed over the details, clearly wanting to avoid further complications. Michael left the hotel with a renewed sense of purpose. He now had a name, Carla Sanchez, and a lead on how to uncover the truth. If he could track down this waiter, he might be able to prove what Becky had done and clear his name. His next step was to find Carla and get her to talk. Michael was ready to do whatever it took to set things right, not just for himself, but for Mary. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her over something so vile and manipulative. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, and Michael knew that if he could just get to the bottom of it, he might still have a chance to save his relationship with Mary. Michael's determination was unwavering as he drove through the winding roads of the countryside. The city's towering buildings and busy streets were left far behind as he ventured deeper into a rural area, following the leads he had gathered about Carla Sanchez. His mind was racing with thoughts of how he would approach her and what he would say, but most of all, he was focused on one thing, getting the truth. Carla had moved back to the countryside to care for her ailing mother, who was now in the local hospital awaiting surgery. With the money Carla had received, she had been able to secure the necessary treatment for her mother, and it was a relief that had lifted a heavy burden from her shoulders. She hadn't anticipated that her involvement in Becky's scheme would come back to haunt her so quickly. At the hospital, Carla sat by her mother's bedside, holding her hand as they chatted quietly. The tension that had gripped their lives in recent months had eased now that her mother's surgery was imminent. They talked about the future, about how things would be better once her mother was healthy again. Carla smiled, trying to push aside the guilt that nagged at her from time to time, but for now, she was focused on her mother's recovery. As they talked, Carla noticed a figure approaching the room. Her heart skipped a beat when she recognized Michael, his face tense and determined. Panic surged through her. She knew exactly why he was here. Michael paused in the doorway, taking in the scene before him. He saw the relief in Carla's eyes, the happiness that came from knowing her mother would be treated. But he also saw the flicker of fear when she met his gaze. That fear told him everything he needed to know. She was involved, but she wasn't the mastermind. Still, he needed answers. Carla, Michael said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. We need to talk. Outside. Carla glanced at her mother, who looked at her with concern. It's okay, Mama, she reassured her. I'll be right back. She reluctantly stood up and followed Michael into the corridor. The hospital walls felt like they were closing in on her as she faced him, knowing there was no easy way out of this situation. Michael, she began, but he cut her off. "I know you were involved in what happened to me," Michael said, his tone firm but not unkind. "I know Becky paid you to drug me. But I need to understand why. Why did you do it, and why did you resign right after?" Carla's eyes filled with tears, the weight of her actions crashing down on her. I needed the money," she confessed, her voice trembling. "My mother needed surgery, and I didn't have any other way to pay for it. Becky approached me with an offer. It was so much money, more than I'd ever seen. I didn't realize it would turn into this." Michael listened, his heart heavy. He could see the desperation in Carla's eyes, the guilt she carried. It didn't excuse what she had done, but it made sense. She had been caught between a rock and a hard place, and Becky had taken advantage of that. "Carla, I get that you were desperate," Michael said softly, "but because of what you did, my life is falling apart. Mary, she doesn't believe me. I need you to help me make this right." Carla nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll do whatever I can, Michael. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I'll tell Mary the truth, everything. Just please, don't let this destroy my mother's chance at recovery." Michael took a deep breath, considering her plea. He needed to clear his name and save his relationship with Mary, but he also understood the importance of Carla's situation. "We'll figure this out," he said finally. "But first, you need to come back with me and explain everything to Mary." As Carla and Michael returned to her mother's hospital room, the air was thick with tension. Carla's mother, Maria, had overheard enough of their conversation to piece together what had happened. Her frail hands trembled with a mix of anger and disappointment as she looked at her daughter, the weight of the revelation heavy on her heart. "How could you, Carla?" Maria's voice was shaky, but there was a steely resolve in her eyes. "How could you do something so wrong? I raised you better than that." Tears welled up in Carla's eyes as she knelt beside her mother's bed, guilt washing over her. "Mama, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do. I was scared of losing you, and Becky's offer seemed like the only way out." Maria shook her head, her expression hardening. "And now look at what's happened. You've brought shame on yourself, and you've hurt this young man and his family. How can I go through with this surgery knowing what you've done to get the money?" Carla's heart broke at her mother's words. She had never wanted things to turn out this way. The money had been a lifeline, but now it felt like a curse. "Mama, please, don't say that. I did it for you, to save your life." Maria's eyes softened slightly, but her resolve didn't waver. "I can't accept this, Carla. I won't. If this is how the money was obtained, then I'd rather not have the surgery at all." Michael, who had been standing quietly by the door, felt a pang of remorse as he watched the scene unfold. He could see the pain in Maria's eyes, the internal struggle between accepting her daughter's sacrifice and rejecting the means by which it was made. He knew he had to step in. "Mrs. Sanchez," Michael said gently, stepping forward. "I understand why you're upset. What Carla did was wrong, but she did it out of love and desperation. And now that it's done, refusing the surgery won't change what happened. But it could change your future, for the better." Maria looked up at Michael, her expression conflicted. "You're a good man, Michael, and I'm sorry for what my daughter did to you. But how can I live with myself knowing that I benefited from something so deceitful?" Michael nodded, understanding her dilemma. "I can't tell you how to feel, but I do know that you have a daughter who loves you and wants to see you healthy again. And I also know that if you don't go through with this surgery, it will only make things worse for both of you. Carla regrets what she did, and she's willing to make amends. But that starts with you getting better." Carla held her mother's hand tightly, her voice pleading. "Mama, please. Don't punish yourself because of my mistakes. I'll do everything I can to make things right, I promise." Maria's eyes filled with tears as she looked between her daughter and Michael. After a long moment, she sighed deeply and nodded, her resolve softening. "All right," she whispered, "I'll go through with the surgery. But only because I know how much you both want this." Carla let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding and hugged her mother tightly. "Thank you, Mama. Thank you so much." Michael smiled softly, relieved that Maria had agreed to the surgery. The situation was far from resolved, but this was a step in the right direction. Now, with Carla's mother on the path to recovery, they could focus on the next challenge, telling Mary the truth and dealing with Becky's betrayal. Carla's anxiety was palpable as she and Michael prepared to return to the city. The thought of confronting Becky, who had already threatened her, was daunting. Despite Michael's assurances, Carla couldn't shake the fear of what Becky might do to her in retaliation. However, with her mother's surgery underway and her own future uncertain, she knew she had to face the consequences of her actions. Michael sensed Carla's reluctance and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I know this is difficult, Carla, but you're doing the right thing. Once we expose Becky, we can start to clear the air and make things right." Carla nodded, her expression resolute but anxious. "I just hope she doesn't come after me or my family. I'm really scared." "Trust me," Michael said firmly. "I won't let her hurt you. We'll get through this together." Their journey back to the city was filled with a sense of urgency. Michael was determined to bring the truth to light and salvage his relationship with Mary. He had planned a meeting with Becky under the pretense of rekindling their relationship, but his real goal was to expose her manipulation and deceit. They arranged to meet at a cozy, upscale restaurant. The setting was calm and elegant, a stark contrast to the storm of emotion swirling in Michael's mind. He had invited Becky for what she believed would be a reconciliation over coffee. As she arrived, her demeanor was bright and hopeful. Completely unaware of the trap that was about to be sprung, Becky entered the restaurant with a wide smile, dressed to impress and exuding an air of confidence. She spotted Michael at a table near the window and made her way over, her heart fluttering with anticipation. She thought this meeting was a turning point. Finally, Michael was coming to his senses and seeing her worth. "Michael." Becky greeted him cheerfully, her voice full of warmth. "I'm so glad you wanted to meet. I was beginning to think you might be reconsidering." Michael rose to greet her, his expression calm but resolute. "Becky, thank you for coming. I thought it was time we talked." As they settled into their seats and ordered coffee, Becky's enthusiasm didn't waver. She chatted about the future, about how wonderful things would be once Michael had made his decision. To her, this meeting was a sign that her persistence had paid off. However, as the conversation continued, Michael's demeanor changed. He leaned forward, his tone growing more serious. "Becky, there's something we need to discuss. It's about what happened between us and the actions you took to ensure it happened." Becky's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly masked her concern with a laugh. "What do you mean, Michael? I thought we were here to talk about us." "We are," Michael said firmly. "But first, I need you to know that I've found out everything about what happened that night. I know you colluded with the waiter to drug me and then manipulated the situation to your advantage. And I have proof." Becky's eyes widened in shock and fear. "Proof? What are you talking about?" Michael pulled out his phone and showed her the CCTV footage from the hotel, focusing on the moments where Becky and the waiter were seen together. "I have footage of you leading me to the hotel room and evidence of your collaboration with the waiter. I also spoke with Carla, who admitted to her role under duress." Becky's face went pale as she took in the evidence. Her confident facade crumbled, replaced by a look of desperation. "Michael, please, you don't understand." "I just wanted." "It's too late for excuses," Michael cut her off. "You've caused a lot of pain, not just to me, but to Mary and to Carla. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about doing what's right." Becky's composure shattered, and she began to tremble. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought if I could just save it," Michael said coldly. "The damage is done, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. I'll be speaking to the authorities and making sure you face the consequences of your actions." The confrontation between Michael and Becky had been intense, but the aftermath was even more chaotic. As Becky was led away by the police, her face was a mask of defiant laughter, an unsettling sound that echoed through the restaurant. Michael watched with a mixture of relief and apprehension, knowing that while one battle was won, the war was far from over. A few days later, just when Michael and Mary were beginning to hope for some semblance of normalcy, the doorbell rang. Mary, still reeling from the upheaval, opened the door to find Becky standing on the doorstep. Becky's expression was a twisted mix of satisfaction and malice. Becky. Mary's voice was cold, her heart racing with dread. Becky didn't wait for an invitation. She pushed past Mary and entered the house, holding out a piece of paper. "I thought you might want to see this," she said with a cruel smile. Mary took the report from Becky's hand, her eyes scanning the words. The pregnancy test results were clear. Becky was pregnant, and the father was identified as Michael. Mary's world seemed to tilt as she absorbed the shocking revelation. How did you get this?" Mary managed to stammer, her voice trembling. Becky laughed, a sound that was both bitter and triumphant. "My family has always bailed me out of trouble. They made sure I got what I needed to make things even more complicated for you." Mary felt her knees go weak as she stared at the report, the weight of the news crushing her. The evidence of Becky's pregnancy was a devastating blow, a cruel twist in the already tangled web of deceit and betrayal. Her heart ached with a pain that was almost unbearable, and she struggled to hold back her tears. "Why are you doing this?" Mary whispered, her voice barely audible. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to know that I've won," Becky said, her voice dripping with venom. "Michael will be tied to me forever now. And you're just collateral damage in my grand scheme." Mary's emotions were a storm of confusion and sorrow. She had believed in Michael's love and their future together, and now everything seemed to be unraveling. The thought of Michael being tied to Becky in such a permanent way shattered her hopes and dreams. Becky, sensing her victory, smirked one last time before turning to leave. "I'm done here. Enjoy your shattered world." As Becky walked out, Mary was left standing there, the pregnancy test report in her hand, feeling the crushing weight of despair. She sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face as she tried to process the enormity of what had just happened. Michael arrived at the house just in time to see Becky leaving. His heart sank as he saw Mary's distraught expression. Rushing to her side, he knelt beside her, his own pain mirrored in her eyes. "Mary," he said gently, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know she would do this." Mary looked up at him, her eyes filled with anguish. "Michael, how could this happen? How could she manipulate things so badly? And now we're faced with this." "I know," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "But we need to face this together. We'll find a way through this, no matter how impossible it seems." Mary shook her head, her tears flowing freely. "I don't know if I can. The betrayal, the lies, it's all too much." The weight of the recent revelations was still heavy on Michael and Mary as they tried to process their new reality. Just when they thought they had reached the worst, another blow came crashing down. Michael's father, a man known for his imposing presence and unwavering control, stormed into Michael's apartment with an air of authority that brooked no argument. His face was a mask of fury and disappointment, his patience with his son wearing thin. "Michael," his father began, his voice low and menacing, "this farce has gone on long enough. I've tolerated your defiance and your choice to be with Mary, but now you're dragging our family's name through the mud with this scandal." Michael, still reeling from Becky's visit and the implications of her pregnancy, stood up to face his father. "What are you talking about, father?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," his father snapped. "Becky is pregnant with your child, and that child will be a part of this family. There is no way in hell we're going to allow our bloodline to be tainted or raised outside our name. You will marry her. It's not up for discussion." Michael felt a surge of anger and frustration. "You can't be serious. I won't marry Becky. I love Mary, and I'm not going to let you or anyone else dictate my life." His father's expression hardened, his voice growing colder. "You don't have a choice. If you refuse, you will be cut off from the family. No inheritance, no support, nothing. You'll be left to fend for yourself and your little family. But you will marry Becky and do your duty." The ultimatum was harsh and unyielding. Michael felt the pressure building, knowing that his father's threats were not idle. The idea of losing his family's support was daunting, but the thought of marrying Becky against his will was even more unbearable. Meanwhile, Mary was struggling with her own overwhelming emotions. The recent revelations had left her feeling shattered, and now, with Michael's father demanding that he marry Becky, she felt like she was caught in a storm with no way out. Sitting alone in her apartment, Mary held Terry close, trying to find solace in her daughter's innocent presence. The thought of leaving Michael seemed like the only way to escape the turmoil and give her daughter a stable life. She had never anticipated that love could come with such an unbearable price. As Michael returned to the apartment, he saw the anguish etched on Mary's face. He could sense her inner conflict, the pain of the decision she was facing. He approached her, his heart heavy with the weight of their struggles. Mary, Michael said softly, I know this is a lot to deal with. My father's demands, it's all too much. But I need you to know that I'm not giving up on us. I'm going to find a way to fix this. Mary looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. Michael, I can't keep doing this. The pressure, the betrayal, it's too much. I thought we could make it work, but now it feels like everything is falling apart. Michael knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. Mary, I know it's been hard. But I love you, and I want to be with you. I can't imagine my life without you and Terry. We'll get through this, I promise. We just have to stay strong and face it together. Mary's resolve wavered as she saw the sincerity in Michael's eyes. She wanted to believe that they could overcome the obstacles, but the path ahead seemed fraught with more challenges than she had ever imagined. I don't know if I can keep fighting, Mary admitted, her voice breaking. Maybe it would be easier to just leave and start over. For Terry's sake, if nothing else. Michael's heart ached at her words. I understand how you feel. But before you make any decisions, let's try to tackle this together. We'll deal with my father's demands, and we'll find a way to handle Becky's situation. We can't let them tear us apart. Mary took a deep breath, looking at Michael with a mix of hope and fear. Okay. I'll try. But we have to be honest with each other and face whatever comes next. Michael nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. They had both been through so much, and while the road ahead was uncertain, they had each other. For now, that was enough to hold on to as they faced the next set of challenges together. The tension in Michael and Mary's lives reached new heights when Becky, with the full backing of her family and Michael's own, orchestrated a shocking move. A press conference was suddenly announced, creating a flurry of media buzz and speculation. The announcement was poised to be a public spectacle, one that would leave no room for doubt or discussion. On the day of the press conference, news outlets and photographers gathered in anticipation. The atmosphere was electric with curiosity as reporters buzzed about what was to come. Mary and Michael, both feeling the weight of the situation, watched from a distance, their apprehension growing with each passing moment. When the press conference began, Becky took center stage, flanked by her family and several influential members of Michael's family. Her demeanor was confident, almost triumphant, as she prepared to deliver her statement. Thank you all for coming, Becky began, her voice steady. Today, I have some important and exciting news to share with you. I am delighted to announce that I will be marrying Michael, the man I love, and we are expecting a child together. The room erupted in murmurs of surprise and speculation as Becky continued. She revealed photographs of herself and Michael, some taken during their recent time together and others showing them in more intimate moments. The images were carefully selected to paint a picture of a loving and committed couple, further adding to the credibility of her announcement. Our families are overjoyed at this news, Becky said, her smile unwavering. Michael and I are looking forward to building a life together and welcoming our child into a family that values tradition and unity. The impact of Becky's announcement was immediate and profound. The press coverage was relentless, with headlines blaring the news of Michael's impending marriage and the baby on the way. The photographs and Becky's confident presentation painted a picture that was difficult to refute, and the public's perception began to shift. For Mary, the news was a crushing blow. She watched the coverage with a sinking feeling the walls close in around her. The idea that Michael's marriage to Becky was now a public affair, complete with the weight of family expectations and media scrutiny, seemed to seal her fate. The hope she had clung to now seemed impossibly distant. Michael, grappling with the fallout, was faced with a flood of emotions. He felt a deep sense of betrayal and frustration. The public announcement was not just a personal affront, it was an attempt to force his hand and cement Becky's position. The pressure was overwhelming, and he knew that any attempt to refute the claims would only draw more attention and complicate matters further. In the midst of this chaos, Michael sought solace and clarity. He reached out to Mary, hoping to find a way to navigate the situation together. They met in a secluded park, away from the prying eyes of the media. Mary, Michael said, his voice filled with urgency, "I know this is devastating. Becky's announcement is a calculated move to manipulate the situation. We need to stay strong and figure out our next steps." Mary looked at him, her face a mix of sorrow and determination. "It feels like everything is slipping away. The public announcement has changed everything, and it's hard to see a way forward." The situation had escalated into a full-blown media circus, with Becky's campaign against Mary taking a particularly cruel turn. Becky, seizing the moment, had begun painting Mary as a homewrecker, accusing her of misconduct and portraying her as the primary cause of the turmoil surrounding Michael and their families. The accusations were both damaging and personal, designed to undermine Mary's credibility and vilify her in the public eye. As the media frenzy continued, headlines flashed stories about Mary's supposed history of misconduct and her alleged attempts to sabotage Michael's engagement to Becky. The press painted a narrative of a woman who had been unfaithful, seeking to destroy a wholesome relationship. The story gained traction quickly, fueled by Becky's calculated strategy and the media's eagerness to sensationalize. Mary, feeling the weight of the public scrutiny and personal attacks, struggled with the overwhelming situation. The image that Becky was creating seemed to overshadow her true character and intentions. The pressure was immense, and Mary felt like her world was closing in on her. In a desperate attempt to clear her name and salvage her dignity, Mary reached out to Michael, hoping they could find a way to counteract Becky's damaging narrative. They met in a quiet cafe, away from the media's prying eyes. "Michael," Mary said, her voice trembling with a mix of frustration and sadness, "I don't know how to fight this. Becky's turned everything against me, and it feels like there's no way to clear my name. People are believing her version of things, and it's tearing me apart." Michael's face was etched with concern and anger. "I know, Mary. Becky is using every tactic she can to destroy you and our relationship. But we can't let her succeed. We need to take action and show the truth, no matter how hard it is." Mary nodded, wiping away a tear. "What can we do? The public image is so powerful, and it feels like we're fighting an uphill battle. I don't want to be seen as the villain, but it's hard when the narrative is so against me." Michael took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. "We need to address this head-on. We can't let Becky's lies stand uncontested. I'll arrange a press conference where we can present our side of the story. We'll provide evidence and counter her claims with the truth." Mary looked at him with a mix of hope and apprehension. "Do you really think that will make a difference? Becky's already set the narrative, and it feels like the damage is done." "It's not too late," Michael said firmly. "We have to fight for ourselves and for the truth. I'm not going to let Becky's lies define us. We'll show the world who we really are and that we're being honest." With a renewed sense of determination, Michael and Mary began preparing for the press conference. They gathered evidence to refute Becky's claims and worked on presenting a clear, truthful account of their situation. They knew it would be a difficult and emotionally charged event, but they were committed to fighting for their integrity and their relationship. The press conference was scheduled for the following week, and as the day approached, Michael and Mary felt a mixture of anxiety and hope. They knew that this was their chance to confront Becky's narrative and to regain control of their story. When the day arrived, Michael and Mary stood together at the podium, facing a sea of reporters and cameras. Michael began by addressing the press with a calm but resolute tone. "Thank you for coming today. We're here to set the record straight and address the false accusations that have been spread about Mary. The claims that she is a homewrecker and responsible for our current situation are completely untrue." Mary stepped forward, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of the moment. "I want to clarify the truth. The accusations against me are baseless and hurtful. My past, which has been manipulated and distorted, does not define who I am or my relationship with Michael." Michael continued, presenting evidence that countered Becky's claims, including testimonies and documentation that supported their version of the story. As they spoke, they could see the media's attention shifting, with some reporters beginning to question Becky's narrative. The fallout from the press conference was swift and severe. As Michael and Mary's side of the story gained traction, public opinion shifted dramatically. The media, initially captivated by Becky's narrative, now turned its attention to the discrepancies in her story. The revelations from the press conference sparked outrage among the public, who were appalled by Becky's manipulative tactics and the lies she had spread. Becky, unable to cope with the wave of negative attention and public scorn, was at home watching the aftermath unfold on television. The relentless coverage of her deceit and the public's harsh condemnation took a toll on her already fragile state. The weight of the situation proved too much, and Becky suddenly collapsed. Her distress becoming a serious medical emergency, she was rushed to the hospital, where doctors quickly determined that she was 3 months pregnant. The timing of her pregnancy created an even bigger scandal. The public was shocked to learn that Becky had been pregnant before her alleged encounter with Michael. This new information painted her in an even worse light, as it was clear she had been involved in other relationships before trying to pin the pregnancy on Michael. The news of Becky's pre-existing pregnancy spread like wildfire. The media had a field day with the update, further exposing Becky's deceit and casting her in an even more negative light. Headlines blared about her dishonesty, and she was labeled a shameless woman who had attempted to manipulate a high-profile situation to her advantage. Becky's hospital stay became the focal point of sensationalist coverage. The media's focus shifted from Michael and Mary to Becky's personal life, with extensive reports on her pregnancy and the implications of her deceit. The public's outrage was palpable, with many condemning Becky for her actions and questioning her character. As the storm around Becky intensified, Michael and Mary tried to navigate the aftermath. While they were relieved that the truth had come to light, the situation had left them emotionally drained. The public scrutiny had taken its toll, and they both needed time to recover and rebuild.